This is embarrassing because I've got a creaky bottom bracket. Listen to this. Oh my God. Right, I'm going to show you how to fix it. Yep, it doesn't matter how expensive your bike is or whether you've got the latest and greatest SRAM red stuff. If your bottom bracket is creaking, it just ruins your bike ride, which is exactly what happened, and now I've got to fix it. So first of all, let's do some problem solving. It's a bit like solving a murder mystery, I suppose. Now, I realise after editing this that I can probably be a lot more helpful to you guys in problem solving your own bottom bracket creakiness. So what I'm about to talk you through is what I did, but hopefully I'm going to interfere every now and then and talk you through the processes that I go to get to the solution. And I'm going to start off with a bit of history. The frame was running a Praxis bottom bracket, so T47 internal to 24 millimeters, and it was running a Shimano Ultegra crankset absolutely perfectly, not a creak out of it. Then we obviously had the opportunity of fitting this new SRAM red group set. I did that in a right hurry, that's no excuse, because I wanted to get out and test ride it and hit that embargo deadline, so you guys had that video ready to go. Thanks for watching, by the way. If you've not seen it so far, go and check it out. It's probably one of the most comprehensive reviews, I think, on YouTube. We were probably a little bit too ambitious. Anyway, took it out on my first ride, absolutely fine, didn't think anything of it, but I did know that I was missing a bearing seal. So on these, you have a bearing just here, and then there's like this little bearing seal. And the bottom bracket that I put in here needed a different diameter inside here, 29 millimeters, and for whatever reason it was missing this part. So not a big deal, it's gonna let some water in, but I just fitted it without and added a spacer to adjust it. Shouldn't normally make a difference. Bit of a, not something we do to a customer's bike, but it's my own bike, I wanted to get out and ride it, so I knew that was missing. Anyway, first ride, no bother, didn't hear anything of it. The second ride I did, I just got the tiniest little creak right towards the end of the ride and just thought that the preload wasn't quite right. Anyway, what happened after that was going to be a bit embarrassing, because Alex from the Peak Talk channel got in touch and said, hey, I've got a day off. Any chance I could go and take that blade for a ride? Yeah, you can. Just give me a moment to sort the bottom bracket out. Didn't have a chance, he turned up. Anyway, briefed him, said, look, there's a bearing seal missing, go and ride it. He took it for a ride, and by the time it came back, it was creaking like a... Yeah, I got it back in, I took it all apart again, couldn't really see any problems. I did put that bearing seal back in, because by this time, that bearing seal had come through the post, so everything had gone back through correctly. And I took it out for a ride, and within about 10 minutes of my bike ride, it was creaking, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse until it was like how you heard at the start of the video. So now we're back in the workshop, and we're gonna try and work out how I f this up. Okay, now you guys have the backstory. Maybe you are now forming your own hypothesis of what I did wrong here. Now, this is really important, because at some point in your biking life, your bottom bracket was working perfectly and something must have happened that started to make something creak and make a noise. So with this in mind, we're now going to start creating a hypothesis and then test those hypotheses, but working in a really logical way so we can bracket out problems. And the easiest way to do this is to start working from the outside in, checking every detail as we go, and we start here. First theory is that the main bolt could be coming loose, which I think is highly unlikely. Yep, that's definitely not come loose. Now with SRAM, you need to make sure that you have a 45 millimeter chain line. So you measure from the bottle cage bolts, essentially the middle of the frame, to the center of these two chain rings here, should be 45 millimeters. Okay, you'd think this would be quite simple, but it isn't as simple as it sounds, sadly. Because T47 is still a relatively new standard, all the bottom bracket manufacturers haven't quite caught up with it. So for instance, we have here a rotor T47 internal bottom bracket that I was using in this situation. And initially these have been out for 30 millimeters and 24 millimeters. And when you buy these bottom brackets, they have little charts like this that tell you what size spacers to use, but they don't always line up with reality, so it's definitely worth checking. What we're trying to do here is try and put in spacers that get past this little gap here, so we have a flush surface, and then to get to the chain line that we need. So it's not as easy as just following the chart. Sometimes you actually need to get a pair of calipers out and do the measurement yourself. Now, the rotor bottom bracket we've got in here, the bearing is slightly recessed. So what you do, you take a measurement to make sure that you put in the right amount of spacers to get to that 45 millimeter chain line. And I'm confident that that is all okay. So that's one spacer just there. That's our other spacer and our bearing shield. On the SRAM system, we have this little preload bolt here. So my first theory when I was out riding was that this had come loose, and I did actually stop and try and just tighten it and check it out. But I actually think I possibly over tightened it in that ride. It's just a way of eliminating, but this hasn't slipped at all. That's actually in really good nick. And it's probably got 2 turns of preload on, which is loads. Sometimes if you don't put the right amount of spacers in, you can put too much and it just sort of clicks back. So next theory is that these bearings could actually be damaged in that whole process. Yeah, that's spinning okay as well. So I think that's highly unlikely. Right, let's get these bottom bracket cups out and see what we can find. Okay, I think I might have just had a theory, and that is, when I installed this, I actually installed it with plumber's PTFE tape. It's a trend that I've been seeing on Instagram that I don't normally do to customers, but I'm kind of experimenting with myself. I've been really surprised if that's causing the creak, unless I'm not getting the alignment. But okay, this is something you might have seen on the channel before. I have actually used it, I remember, on some titanium frame options. I think a guy called BK is making it fairly popular. It's now become known as the BK way. I'm always slightly dubious about doing things that aren't to manufacturer's specifications, but I'm always open-minded to new ideas, and so I've been experimenting with this a little bit. And I haven't used it before on a T47 situation where you have these much bigger threads. But essentially the theory is that the PTFE tape is there as another barrier to stop the 2 reactive metals corroding against each other. Now, the second you put something in there that's going to affect the torque rating, i.e. Loctite or PTFE or whatever it might be, you need to be aware that what torque settings you're going to bring this up to. And one of the problems you're about to see me do is the tools required to get onto these very, very small engagement points. And you can see here just how hard it is to get something like this up to 40 or even 50 Newton meters. So you can see how careful I am being with these tools to make sure this doesn't slip. Interesting. So that is how that bottom bracket has come out, and that is all PTFE tape, which really hasn't stayed put quite how I imagined it, and it's actually caused like a little ring. So yeah, all this PTFE tape that I'd put on is actually all bunched up in here. Oh yeah, and there is the rest of it. Well, I'm kind of suspicious that this actually might have been caused by mechanicking stupidity. I probably knew better, but I did it anyway. And also all this was just getting in the way of a good flush fit against here. And it's this interface that's the important one. It's that interface between the edge here and the edge of the frame that's got to be completely flush. So I don't know whether I'll retry it or just stick with what I know and just stick some grease in there like I probably should have done in the first place, because I think that is probably what's been causing it. In hindsight, that feels so much better. And now I'm actually going to take the time that I should have taken when I first did this and I wasn't in such a rush, and have a really, really good look and make sure I've got a completely flush fit. So these are all the spacers we need to do. This isn't an ideal amount of spacers, I have to say. I think what I'm going to do in a later video is show you guys a bit of a hack that you can do with these types of bottom brackets, where you can now actually buy little 30mm top hats, which I think will be a better solution to use a standard 6806 bearing. Use a plastic top hat conversion rather than using these bearings which have been stepped down to 29.88. So just a very quick one on that, and I will do another video on this. The problem with some of these step downs is that you have a metal on metal interface, and the benefit to SRAM going to the weird 29.88 essentially is that they can actually use a plastic top hat in there, so you've got a plastic to metal interface on the crank, which is much better than having a bearing which has been stepped down and it's a metal to metal interface. So I'm going to show you how you can almost take this out, put a standard 6806 bearing in there, and then put a plastic top hat and still get to the desired result. Bit of a hack, but I think it's probably going to be a better long-term fix. Now, what I'm doing now, just giving all these a wipe just to make sure there's no grit or anything in between these layers which could have been causing it. Tell you what, while we're here with the camera, do you remember in the SRAM Red video when we talked about the black anodized front mech and whether it was going to get scratched? Well, probably after 300 or so kilometers. Take a look at just how scratched up this is now. It really hasn't taken much at all, but I think I know why they did it in black, because I guess it does make the front mech, which normally are quite a bulbous thing, sort of blend in with your bike. Anyway, jury's still out, but I mean, that was always going to happen, wasn't it? These need to be tightened up to a rather hideous amount of torque, if I remember, which is 54. I mean, I knew that off the top of my head, but I always want to look it up. I've loosened that preload bolt off, so all I want to do is just wind that on so it just touches, so it takes out any lateral play and shouldn't be too tight. And you really don't want to do this bolt up tight. It's literally just enough to close it off. Okay, let's give that a go. Okay, so hopefully what we've taken away from this video then is solving any sort of problem, you take a similar approach. One, try and look into the history and form some hypotheses and then test those hypotheses and then go through a logical process of eliminating one thing at a time. And at the bottom bracket, the easiest way of doing that is to work inwards. So check, first of all, is everything tight? Is everything done up correctly? Then check your preload, then check all your spacers and all your chain line. Then you check for the bearing wear. And if you have bearing wear, what is causing the bearing wear, which is then you start looking into what might be causing misalignment issues. And hopefully by following those procedures, you can get to a fix which won't drive you completely crazy. Alex, I'm really, really sorry if I spoilt your ride out of my own stupidity, but there we go. I can definitely confirm no more creaking. Oh, cows say there's no more creaking either. Tell you what though, while I'm out here riding, I have been thinking, why does a bit of PTFE tape actually make any difference to that sort of thing at all? Well, my theory is, as I did that up, it just cut into the tape. PTFE tape is there to really help create a seal rather than a corrosion barrier, and there's no need to have a seal. So probably gonna do it once more time just to be convinced that the whole Instagram fad is just a fad. Well, I'm probably not gonna make a habit of doing it on customers' bikes, that's for sure. Right, so here's what I'm talking about in here. Now I've got the bits in front of me. So what actually happened was all that PTFE tape bunched up into here. Now I only put one roll of PTFE tape on this, but as you saw, it all cut in and bunched up and ended up into that channel. So I think if I do this again, I'm just going to come back a little bit and avoid the chances of anything bunching up and ending up between these two really critical faces. So personally, I don't think I'm a massive fan of this because I think it affects the torque rating too much. Maybe that is okay when you're using it with a tool that you can really engage and actually put some pressure on, but when you're dealing with such a small tool interface, I don't think I'll be using this anymore. I hope that video was somewhat useful. If it was, please get down in the comments and let me know. Think about subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.